Hey, I'm Kev Kermus, welcome to Power Oversteer, and this is a review of round 17 and 18 of the 2013 Indycar Series season, the Grand Prix of Houston, and what a double header it was, the third and final one of the season, and we saw big changes in the championship race. We saw one suffer, we saw the other take advantage and really have another excellent week on the street courses. In race 1 we saw many passing moves, we saw how wide open the track was, which allowed some of this passing. We also saw a rather large bump in turn 1, which kind of forced practice into hibernation, and we also saw rain on Sunday morning to force qualifying off, and so it was set for race 2 by the order going into race 1. In race 2, unfortunately, we saw a terrible accident as well, and I would like to wish Daniel and Kitty well in his recovery from, I think it was 2 fractured vertebrae in his back and a broken ankle, which he had surgery on immediately and is now recovering in Indianapolis, I believe. So yeah, very well wishes to the Chip Ganassi driver, and thankful that no real damage was done in that terrible accident near the end. There were many spectators injured, but none seriously, and they were all treated for on the day. And so yeah, it's just another reminder that motorsports is dangerous, and yeah, it's a terrible accident, but the safety cell did its job, catch fencing did its job, even though, you know, a wheel did go in the crowd, and you know, some debris did injure some folks there, but you know, I'm sure lessons will be learned from the incident. But this is a review of the whole Grand Prix of Houston. So going into this program further, we of course start with the race recaps. So the race recap for the Grand Prix of Houston. So race 1, and on the pole it was Takuma Sato, AJ Foyt's first pole since Billy Bowden 1999, would you believe, and in Super Texas, home state as well, their virtual home race. Deserted of Will Power, Scott Dixon and Simon Pagenaud. Serenity Special in the top 5, great start for her. And the 6th was James Hinchcliffe, but at the start we tried standing starts in both races, and in both times the first start failed. This time it was Charlie Kimber who stalled on the grid in his Chip Ganassi machine. And then on the second start, James Hinchcliffe kind of couldn't get away, he kind of stalled as well, and you know, Tristan Volche just managed to avoid him but hit the wall, so he had to go into the pits for some repairs, and Ed Carpenter just grazed the left hand side pod of the Andretti Autosport machine, and so he spun around, and that was the first caution immediately, or the second caution immediately. And after the race, you know, James Hinchcliffe, you know, wouldn't say it was the problem, but it seemed to point to just the software error, you know, programming in the start. And so after that, we had Sato have the pit during this second safety car. This because of a puncture. He had a slow punch on his right side, I think, Dyer, and so yeah, he had to pit under the first safety car from the lead. But after that, we had a nice race at the front between Power and Dixon, and behind that we had a Luca Filippi train, the Barracuda of Brian Herter racing driver, filling in his final appearance this season for the team, looking to impress, get that seat for next season. He was a bit slow early on, we saw EJ Visa pass him into turn 6, but you know, he's doing well holding them up. We also saw some early pit stops for Graham Rahal and Helio Castro Neves, and then we saw Tony Kanaan have some brake problems in the Filippi train into turn 6, I believe, and that was when he's in the top 10, and so he was another early retirement. But then we saw bigger problems for the championship. Helio Castro Neves in this Penske had to pit again with a gear selection problem, and so they had to replace the gear cluster, and that cost him about 7 laps. Very fast work from the Penske crew, but as I said, 7 laps down now, and so he was on the back foot for the rest of the race and only finished in 18th in the end. Meanwhile, at the front, we saw Simona Di Silvestro up to third place, making a great move in turn 6 on Simon Pagenaud. And then we saw further back Justin Wilson and Oversteer were getting close to each other in turn 2, like many other drivers before and after them. But it's Scott Dixon leading at the front, and this is after Will Power had problems in the pits with the rear jacks, which cost him a bit of time, and so Dixon just came out ahead of Power. But then we had a caution for Simona Di Silvestro and Dario Franchitti getting too close to each other in turn 3. And then we saw Luca Filippi, a great pass down the inside of Simon Pagenaud into turn 2 for third on the restart. And then we saw Bourdais pass Pagenaud in turn 6 for fourth. And then we saw another caution come out, and Will Power and Luca Filippi got kind of caught out. They didn't make their pit stop, so everyone else did, such as Scott Dixon and Simona Di Silvestro. This was because Oil Serbia had stopped in turn 3. When it went green again, we saw Joseph Newgarden make a move on Takuma Sato in turn 2 before James Jakes made the move into turn 3 on Sato. But unfortunately for Sato, he went into the tyres, leaving room, and so just clipped that. And there was another caution out. This meant Will Power and Luca Filippi could finally pit. Then after that, we saw Helio Castroneves have a bit of an incident in turn 3, just forgetting to brake in time and went wide and stalled. And then we saw Justin Wilson force his way past Simon Pagenaud to turn 2 for third place behind Simona Di Silvestro and Scott Dixon. And Dixon was just pulling away at the front with Di Silvestro behind even and Justin Wilson before we had our final caution, which meant that race ended under caution when Mike Conway just locked up his right rears into turn 9 behind Marco Andretti while he was fighting for 13th. And we also had a drive-through penalty for Sebastian Savage for running over a hose in his final pit stop on that 63. But in the end, after all of this, Scott Dixon got his 33rd win in the IndyCar series, the most of any active driver, ahead of Simona Di Silvestro, who finally got her first podium in the IndyCar series, ahead of Justin Wilson with his third top 5 in a row, and Simon Pagenaud in 4th, now 50 points back from Helio Castroneves, who was just leading the championship by 8 points from Scott Dixon. Joseph Newgarden got a great 5th place in an awesome looking Sir Fisher Hartman racing Honda this race. James Jakes and Graham Rahal doing a great job for Rahal, Letterman, Langan 6th and 7th. Sebastian Bourdais 8th for Dragon Racing, 9th EJV, so a very good race for the Andretti Autosport driver. And Luca Filippi grabbed the top 10 in the end in his Barracuda racing machine, passing Charlie Kimball. Will Power down in 12th, disappointing for him in the end. Marco Andretti 13th, Sebastian Sabaja 14th, Dario Franchitti 15th, Mike Conway 16th, Sato 17th, Castroneves in 18th, and Oil Serbia 19th, Ryan Hunterway in 20th. This is after he actually had a bit of a fire on his car, which burnt out some of the electronics and put itself out, and so yeah, that was an electrical problem, and he retired. Tony Kanaan was 21st, Forte 22nd, Carpenter 23rd, and James Hinchcliffe in 24th. And that ended, of course, Castroneves' run of didn't complete every racing lap, and so it's still only Tony Kanaan who has completed every lap on the way to the championship in 2004. As I said, the 49-point leader had been cut to 8, and there were 7 Hondas in the top 10, and this is after Ganassi had switched to Chevrolet for 2014, so good timing from them. But yeah, Justin Wilson being up there after having a punch on that 15, doing an early stop. But as I said, the big story was Helio Castroneves being down there in race 1. Could he be up there in race 2? Well, he started from pole. This is after qualifying had been washed out because it's very heavy raining in the morning, so the grid was set by entry points in it before race 1. So it's Castroneves from Dixon, from Pagenaud, and from Marco Andretti right up there. As I said, the first start was aborted. It's because Sato went into his wrong grid stop quite bad. He kind of missed it, and Dario Franchitti had stalled. And this is after, in the driver's parade in about midday before the race, Franchitti had already had his fingers closed in a window accidentally by a driver, and so yeah, it was not the day for Dario Franchitti, unfortunately. On the second start though, Castroneves led from Dixon away, and then Pagenaud Wilson and Andretti had dropped back, and this because on the second restart or second start, Andretti actually bobbed a bit, and so he actually jumped the start, and so he got a drive-through penalty for that. Behind that, we had Will Power making moves already, past 3 cars into turn 2 before getting past Andretti. And we also had Ryan Hunter-Reay defending majorly from James Hinchcliffe into turn 4. That was investigated, but nothing happened. And then we saw bits fall from Helio Castroneves' car on that bump into turn 1. There was also complaints of oil coming from his car, from Scott Dixon being covered. He had to use his tails quite early, and eventually Castroneves slowed into turn 5 and he stopped in turn 8, and that was one of the first cautions. That was the third caution. This was after Graham Rahal and Tristan Vautier had gone into the wall on that 3 in turn 8. Simone Di Silvestro did a bit of a lunge down the inside of Graham Rahal into that turn, and unfortunately collected them both, and she got a drive-through penalty for that move. But as I said, the big news, Helio Castroneves having to stop out on track early in the race on lap 12. And so Castroneves had a broken gearbox casing, and so the Pentateuch crew had to replace that all. They replaced the whole gearbox. It took 37 laps, and that's how he finished, 37 laps down in 23rd spot. But after this, we had Scott Dixon leading Will Power at the front, and in the pit lane under yellow, Scott Dixon just beat Will Power out, and then after the restart, Power got past Dixon into turn 4 for the lead, as after complaints of Dixon getting pushed a bit in turn 1 on the restart and in turn 3 before that to set up the run. But it's been a stop-start race for most of it. We had 9 cautions in total in the race, and at the front it was mostly Dixon and Power fighting hard. Behind them we had Hinchcliffe, we had Wilson, we had Bourdais, we had Pagenaud as well. But on the final lap, unfortunately, we had a huge accident out of turn 4 into turn 5. During turn 5 was a bit of a bump, and Takuma Sato had been losing his tyres for the previous lap, and he was dropping places late in the race after running in 7th for most of it. But in turn 5 over the bump, he lost the back end. Davin Kitty was right behind him, went over the top of the AJ Foyt machine and into the catch fencing. The PC here went into the crowds, as did debris, and as I said, around 13 people were treated for injuries afterward, but none of them major, and they're all patched up on the day. And as I said, Franchitti suffered two fractured vertebrae, and a broken ankle, which had surgery on the day, and as I said, he's recovering. Again, I wish him well in his recovery. But also in the crash was EJV, who was running behind them, and he just avoided Franchitti, but unfortunately went into the side of Takuma Sato, and he retired on the spot as well. Coming behind them was Simone Di Silvestro, Tristan Vautier, Sebastian Vettel, Jose Newgarden, who all avoided the chaos as well. And so it was a sad end to an entertaining second race of the Grand Prix of Houston, which saw Will Power win, had a Scott Dixon, James Hinchcliffe, Justin Wilson, Sebastian Bourdais in the top 5, Simon Pagenaud, Oriol Seba, Charlie Kimball, Mike Conway in the top 10, Simone Di Silvestro backing up her second with a top 10 finish as well. Tristan Vautier was in a very good 11, ahead of Sebastian Saveja, Joseph Newgarden, Takuma Sato, Darrell Franchitti was classified in 15th, EJ Viso, James Jakes, Graham Rahal, Luca Filippi, Marco Andretti, Ryan Hunter-Reay, Eric Carpenter, Helio Castroneves and Tony Kanaan, who had gone into the wall on that 37 after going a bit wide in turn 7. And so now in the championship you have Scott Dixon leading by 25 points, a 33 point swing in this race alone, following a 41 point swing in the previous race 1. And so that's the race recap. Let's go on to the winners and losers now. So the winners and losers for the Grand Prix of Houston weekend, and let's go alphabetically. Let's start with AJ Foyt, Super Texas team there, effectively a home race in Houston. Tex San Kumasato getting that first pole since 1999, as I said in the first race, but having that slow puncture and that really dictated his race. He was stuck in the midfield for most of it, and then he had that incident with James Jakes and he ended up in the tyre wall and only came in 17th. Then of course we know what happened in the second race, losing the tyres in the end of the race, dropping positions after being looking set for a very strong top 10 finish for the first time in ages. And yeah, he lost it over the bump, and you know what happened to Frank Kitty, unfortunately. And so yeah, a weekend that promised a lot going into that first race just did not end well for AJ Foyt, and Sato just summed up the second half of the season for them. The pace is there, they're just not getting the luck or just making mistakes. And so yeah, 14th and 17th for Sato. He's down in the championship in 16th with 309 points, and he's been threatened from behind by Graham Rahal, just 5 points behind him. He's 29 points off Simone Di Silvestro and Joseph Newgarden ahead of him. So it's just been an awful run of luck, awful second half of the season for the team. And Sato nicking a fight to retain his seat for next season in Fontana. It's going to be interesting to see what happens there. Next up, we're going to have Andretti Autosport. There, 4 drivers, sorry. So we have James Hinchcliffe with third following up. That did not start in the first race, and he was so angry, the whole team was so angry after that first race. As I said, it might have been like a software error or something with the car, because it did start, it just didn't go far after. It barely crawled out the grid slot. But in the second race, made up that with third, and great pace in that race. Not quite the pace of Dixon and Power up front, but enough to hold on to third and get his 4th podium of the year. So his other 3 were for wins in St. Petersburg, Sao Paulo and Iowa, and that Iowa win seems so long ago for James Hinchcliffe, and his up and down season. He even complained about too much wheel spin at the start, having an average start there, but stayed up there and got a great podium finish. Unlike his teammates, Ryan Hunter-Reay, just dreadful luck this weekend. 21st in that second race, gearbox problem, just like Cashin Evans in the first race, had to replace the gearbox cluster and finished in 21st. And then in the first race, just had a fire. It burned all the electrics and then it put itself out, but it's enough to force Hunter-Reay out of the race in 20th. This is after 2 runs being up there in the top 10, so just dreadful luck for the reigning champion, or the soon ex to be champion as well. And he's still right up there, 6th in the championship, just 11 points behind his teammate Marco Andretti, but Will Power just 2 points behind him. So it's going to be interesting to see finishes in the top 5 in Fontana in the championship. EJ Viso, good weekend for him. He got a top 10 in the first race in 9th, and he had very good pace, always up there. Second race just didn't quite work out, 16th after that, being involved in that horrendous accident at the end there. And yeah, he just dropped back in that second race, it seemed. In this Grand Prix of Houston is all about tyre management, it seemed. You get the tyres clicked on for most of the stint, you were doing well. We saw Simon Pagenaud especially struggle early on in the stint in race 1, and then they clicked on in the second part of that stint, and they had the long run pace. But if you had it for the whole stint, you were in a very good spot, such as Dixon and Power for most of it. So yeah, it just didn't seem to work out the tyres for EJ Viso in that second race. Then we have Marco Andretti, who was 20th in that second race and 13th in the first. And second race kind of affected by that drive through for the jump start, and you never really got going in that second race, it seemed. In the first race, he was fighting on the edge of the top 10 and just fell back a bit, and he never really quite had the pace this weekend, Marco, to really challenge. And it's been the case for Andretti Autosport for actually most of the second half of the season as well, not quite having the pace to challenge for wins, just getting solid finishes. But it was James Hinchcliffe who took advantage of that solid pace to get the finish in the second race. So after that, on On the alphabetical list, we have Barracuda Racing, we have Brian Herter Autosport, we have Luca Philippi. He was great in that first race. That was a great pace from him, and you know, he's right up there. He just got caught out by their safety car, unfortunately, like Will Power. But in the end, he got up to 10th, made some aggressive moves near the end. He got past Charlie Kimball. And in the second race, again, his race just did not get going at all, you know, after being into turn 6 wall and, you know, just outbraked himself, being a bit too aggressive there. But he had the fast set up the race in the second race, and so I think he did a good job impressing his employers. And maybe being in the shot for that 98 next season. I would like to see that very much for him. Chip Ganassi. What can we say about Scott Dixon? First and second. Third on the grid in the first race. Came through to win. And he was second on the grid in the second race. Came through to second. And him and Will Power were the class of the show for the weekend. And you know, Power didn't get caught up by that safety car in the first race. You know, it could have been a gauging battle in the last few laps there. But yeah, he had the pace, he showed it, got his 33rd win, the most inactive drivers. Had that 41-point swing in the first race, and then a 33-point swing in the second race with the Castroneves problem, and he leads by 25 points going into finale. Couldn't have wished for much better for Scott Dixon, I think, from that weekend. Unfortunate for his teammate Dario Franchitti. Race 1, yeah, just did not get going. You know, 15th there. Had his problems as well with Di Silvestro. And we all know about the second race, unfortunately. It was just not his day. And he got his fingers caught in the door on the driver's parade by the driver. You know, he had to apologise. Had to get the driver to apologise to him for that. Stalled at the start when, you know, Sato was going to Albuquerque with his grid slot, it seemed. And yeah, his race wasn't planning out that badly in the end. Actually, it was on the edge of the top 10 when we know what happened to Sato in front of him. So I do wish him well. I'll keep saying that in every segment, I think. I wish him well for his recovery. But yeah, just an unfortunate end to another unfortunate season for the Scotsman. Just can't get to grips with his new car, it seems. He's 8th in the championship, probably going to be 9th or even 10th after the race in Fontana, with Hinchcliffe and Kimball not far behind him. And that's not what we expect from him over the whole season for Franchitti. And yeah, I do wish he does come back next season, be that super team with Kanaan and Dixon and Kimball, challenge the Penske super team with Montoya, Castroneves and Power. I think that would be brilliant to watch. And I do wish him well, and do wish he will come back to the IndyCar series next season. So after Chip Ganassi in the alphabetical order is Dale Coyne. What a weekend for them. Great weekend for Justin Wilson, 3rd and 4th in the races, 4th in the championship as well. He's just 3 points ahead of Marco Andretti now. 31 behind Pagano, so might not get 3rd, but just to be 4th anyway in a Dale Coyne racing car. Brilliant from Justin Wilson all weekend. Just couldn't get past Hinchcliffe in the second race, but podium in the first. Well deserved podium as well, and he's got 4 top 5s in a row now. Just brilliant run for him. We're going to Fontana on an oval where, you know, they've proved to be good, Dale Coyne on ovals as well. Shown as by Wilson's win at Texas last season. So yeah, look for Dale Coyne to be up there again as well with Wilson on the ovals. Mike Conway, not quite the overturn he wanted to the series. Good top 10 in the second race though, in 9th in the first race. Ended it in the tyre bay after that lock up behind Marco Andretti on the right rear, as I said. But he was showing good pace and a battle with Wilson for the first half of that race, and you know, just dropped back a bit towards the end. So yeah, very good weekend for Dale Coyne and for Dragon Racing as well. On with Sebastian Bourdais, 5th in the second race, 8th in the first race. Great pace from him. A brilliant move I haven't covered yet, but I will cover that in off the race. I think I'm giving away overtake for the race, but yeah, brilliant move in race 2. And in race 1, he didn't quite have a same amount of pace it seemed in race 2. They seemed to sort of make some changes that really worked in race 2. You know, although he could have really been up there in 3rd, but just couldn't work his way past Wilson or Hinchcliffe. And Cerveja, he did a good job this weekend. I'll give it to Cerveja. You know, 14th and 12th. You know, the results might not suggest it. Didn't get a top 10, but you know, in the second race, especially running 3rd up there on that different strategy with James Jakes, where they pitted early. You know, safety car played out for them. You know, it was a very stop-start race, 9 cautions in that second race, incredibly. And you know, they worked themselves onto the same strategy as everyone else. You know, swerving a bit early on the last lane, so that maybe hindered him in the last part of the race. But he's run up there in 3rd, doing a very good job as well. You know, not really, you know, being in anybody's way, running a good pace, and so yeah, good job from Cerveja this weekend. You know, he's not quite up there in qualifying, 19th in the first race, and of course bonus points or entering points in the second, so he was 24th. But yeah, he made up 12 positions in the second race, and he made up 5 in the first. So yeah, very good job from Cerveja this weekend, and hopefully if he does a good job from Fontana, he'll be on the grid next season. Then we have Ed Carpenter Racing and Mr. Carpenter. Not the best on the road or street courses, and unfortunately he just got involved with Hinchcliffe in that first race, so didn't get far. And then in the second race, his car just stopped, had a mechanical on lap 61. So not much to talk about for Ed here, but the reigning Fontana winner from last season, expect to see him strong there. KV Racing. Oh, Simona Di Silvestro, what a weekend for her. Second, finally her first podium in IndyCar. Been a long time coming from her H3M days as well, and you know, it's brilliant to see her finally on the podium. You know, she wasn't that much slower than Dixon in the end, but you know, didn't quite have the pace to match him, but you know, took advantage of everything that happened in that race. Got a brilliant podium and a top 10 to back it up in the second race. A great weekend from her. On the other hand, for Tony Kanaan, on a big weekend where he's finally announced that Ganassi for next season, he goes into the wall in the second race in turn 7, just got a bit wide on the marbles, and when that happens, the car just goes straight into the wall there. And then the first race had a mechanical issue as well. I think the brakes went when he was running in the top 10, so not the weekend TK would have wanted. And yeah, hopefully, you know, you give a good sign off to the team at Fontana. Panther Racing and Oil Serbia, Mr. Dependable. Wasn't quite dependable in the first race, 19th. I think that mechanical issue with the car though, out of turn 3. But in the second race, he got a very solid top 10 in 7th spot, and so you know, really pushing his claims to, you know, get a seat next season. Talking to KV, maybe even be at Panther, but the next side is going to Briscoe. So yeah, very strong weekend for the Spaniard. Was aggressive with some moves as well, as I said with Justin Wilson. So you know, very good showing again, Mr. Dependable, as I said. Nick Heidfeld, I think, of the IndyCar series. So now we've got Rahal Edmund Lanigan. Brilliant first race for them. 6th and 7th for Jason Rahal. And you know, that's great strategy, bringing in Rahal early. Worked out. They figured out, you know, if you pit earlier, you know, get that clean air, get the laps in, you can jump the guys you're racing with, and it worked out brilliantly for Rahal. And he just stayed behind Jakes in the end in that race. You know, he didn't want to take out his teammates. So yeah, great 6th and 7th. Didn't quite work out in the second race for them. No, you know, Rahal had his problems, so did Jakes, and so 17th and 18th, you know, a lap down and 2 laps down, so it just did not work out for them. You know, Rahal getting involved in that incident with Simona Di Silvestro, which kind of ruined his race from the beginning. And you know, Jakes, you know, just not quite having the pace as well in the first as he did in the first race, but and having that different strategy that didn't quite work out for him like it did for a bit for Cerveja. So you know, he always on the back foot in the second race, but stronger showing for Rahal Edmund. That's encouraging going into Fontana. Sarah Fisher Hartman and Joseph Newgarden, best looking car in years. That was an awesome looking paint scheme, I will say that. And first race, awesome as well. Top 5 for him, backing up that second place he got in Baltimore's career best. And yeah, great to see from Newgarden. Didn't quite work out in the second race, 13th. He just didn't quite have the pace to push on into the top 10. But strong showing again for him, especially in that first race. So looking up for Sarah Fisher Hartman, towards the end of the year, and they were quite handy at Fontana, if I remember, last season. So maybe he can look to get a good, strong finish on the ovals. Now the penultimate team, Smith, Peterson, Hamilton, Simon Pagenaud, 4th and 6th, did a brilliant job all weekend. Didn't quite have the pace on the tyres, especially at the beginning of the stint in the first race, and there was the end of the stint in the second race. So yeah, the change to happened, didn't quite work out, but very strong for Pagenaud, just 55 points off the lead. Not enough to go for the championship, unfortunately, just out, but what a brilliant season for him in 3rd. Backing up that rookie season he had last season in the top 5 in the championship. So, he's got his last season with Smith Peterson, and next season, maybe look out for him in 2015 to be at a top team. He continues. Tristan Vautier, good second race for him, getting 11th, showing, backing up his teammate, showing that car was really good. Unfortunately, that first race just clipped Hinchcliffe, or just avoided Hinchcliffe and clipped the wall with his right rear, and so he damaged the car and came in 22nd. But Vautier showing some pace towards the end of the season. That's good to see for him. He is Rookie of the Year, the only full-time rookie this season. He is going to finish he's finishing 20th at the moment, and he's got quite a gap to James Drake's ahead of him and Sebastian Rosage behind. So probably 20th in the final run-in, and it kind of reflects an up and down season for the rookie, which you would expect in his rookie season. But next season, I expect him to show more of this pace that he seems to have, that he's showing at the beginning and end of the season, not so much in the middle. And so we end with Penske Racing. Will Power, drive of the weekend along with Scott Dixon, really had the pace, got that win in the second race, the second of the season, if I remember correctly, after Sonoma. And he's right up there in the championship as well, for maybe even getting a top 5 on 444 points, just 13 behind Marco Andretti now. And so he's really come on strong. He's led actually laps in the most races out of any driver. He's led 14 races, would you believe? He just doesn't finish them well. He has such as Toronto, Baltimore, and Mid-Ohio, Milwaukee, if I remember, Detroit, St. Petersburg, Long Beach, Sao Paulo. I could name most of the races where it didn't work out for Will Power, but did this weekend. Not in the first race though, and I think that kind of highlights his season, where he did have the pace and it didn't quite work out for him, but just got about the safety car. But yeah, brilliant second race there, hold off Dixon. And for Castro Neves, we had to end our winners and losers on Castro Neves, didn't we? Big loser. As I said, completed every lap this season before this race, all 2003 of them I believe they were, and that record was gone very quickly in that first race. Just a gearbox problem, gearbox cluster had been replaced. Brilliant work by the Penske team to replace that in like 7 laps, but he was 7 laps down. He could only make up to 18th, and then in the second race, from the start, just oil coming from his gearbox, and it was actually a broken gearbox casing. Did again, Penske could a brilliant job replacing that in 30 odd laps. The broken gearbox casing, they replaced the whole gearbox to get him out running again, but could only get up to 23rd out of TK, Tony Kanaan. And so, no, he had great luck, brilliant that throughout the season, and in just 1 week end, all he's worked for, gone. And he's now 25 points behind Dixon. But as we saw last season at Fontana, anything can happen, and it did happen to his Penske teammate Will Power, and so Brian Hunter A1. So he's still got hope. He's still in there with the championship battle. It's up to Dixon and Cashinovas for the championship in Fontana. But that is my winners and losers of the Grand Prix of Houston. Let's do of the race now. So, of the race, or of the weekend even, and driver of the weekend. And it's hard to look past Scott Dixon, first and second in his Chip Ganassi Honda, and they've been very good on the street courses. The double in Toronto, of course, and he's always been up there since. And so yeah, you got to give it to Scott Dixon. You know, the championship on the line, had to do some good results. You know, Cashinevas did have his problems, but Dixon did have to get the results to build up a 25-point lead going into the finale in Fontana. And so, yeah, you got to give your props to Scott Dixon. He is known as the Iceman in the IndyCar series for his cool under pressure, and he showed it once again in Houston. Team of the weekend, and you've got Penske for, well, I could say Penske for Will Power, but you know, they kind of missed the strategy in race 1, you know, not pitting him before the safety car. They made sure of that in race 2 though, pitting the same time as Dixon. And you know, they had the problems with Castro Neves, so maybe Dale Coyne for Justin Wilson, 3rd and 4th in those races, and Mike Conway getting 9th in the second race, even though he didn't quite get the result in the first race because of that lock up near the end, you know, getting 16th. How about Sarah Fisher Hartman with Joseph Lugard? Didn't quite get the result, 13th in the second race, but a top 5 in the first race. Smith Peterson, HP Motorsports, 4th for Pagenaud, 6th for Pagenaud as well. Getting 11th in the second race for Vautier after that incident in the first race, which meant he only got 22nd. And I got to say, there's no real clear team out in front here, so I'm actually going to go for Dragon Racing with Sebastian Bourdais getting 5th and 8th, and with Sebastian Cerveja getting 14th and 12th. They were very strong with Bourdais, you know, they weren't quite up there with the Penske and Ganassi, but you know, they were best of the rest, it seemed, in both races, especially in race 2. They just couldn't get past Wilson and Hinchcliffe at the end there, but I'm giving it because the second driver also did well. You know, Cerveja getting 12th and 14th in those races. You up there in the second race on strategy, up there in 3rd place, and you know, he did a very good job in his Dragon Racing. You know, he needs to do more performances like this to, you know, really be considered for a drive next year, and I'm sure he probably is with Dragon. But yeah, Cerveja, you know, doing himself no harm this weekend, and so yeah, I'm giving it to Dragon Racing because there's no other real standout teams there. So overtake of the race, and again this goes to a Dragon Racing driver. This goes to Sebastian Bourdais in race 2 on that 40 just after the restart because of Tony Kanaan's incident. Going into turn 6 after the ground turn 5, got a great run on Justin Wilson, went down his inside, but he also braked a bit too deep just to take Wilson. He took down James Jakes as well. Jakes did a very good job of seeing him coming, giving him room, and so he got 2 cars in one corner. So I've got to give it to Bourdais for making that move to go up to 5th place. And you know, Wilson knows they got past Jakes, they got up to 6th, and they were behind Hinchcliffe in 4th and Cerveja in 3rd at that moment. And Cerveja and Jakes were on that different strategy, as I said, pitted early. Safety car worked out for them, so they can only pick one more, you know, same strategy as the rest. And yeah, at that time, you know, Bourdais to make that move on the restarts, you know, we had to take advantage of those because it's not the easiest track to overtake on. And some of the drivers really from the Champ Car days, such as Bourdais, Wilson, Power, complained about how they tightened up the radius of most corners here, and you know, it wasn't as free flowing as it was with Champ Car in 2007. But you know, Bourdais showing you can still make some moves if you're brave enough with that brake pedal. So yeah, that was the Grand Prix of Houston. You know, ended on a very sour note, unfortunately, but it had 2 superb races, and it really was big for the championship here because you have his luck finally running out. But when it returned in Fontana in the finale, we saw it last season with Ryan Hunter-Reay, Will Power. Just one moment, and you know, the championship can swing on a dime. And so yeah, that finale is in a week and a half. I expect to preview in about a week. And so till then, salamat for watching. Cheerio.